and start with the acknowledgement that in Ottawa we meet on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin people. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on February 25th, 2021, the committee continues its study on the subject matter of Bill C-15, an act respecting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and to make related and consequential amendments to other acts. This meeting is in place of last Thursday's meeting that was canceled due to votes in the House. We regret that Professor Dwight Newman and Professor Ken Coates could not be with us today. I have ensured via the clerk that they have the necessary information on sending in a written submission. And for an orderly meeting, participants speak and listen in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen in the globe icon, you can select floor, English, or French. You may switch from speaking one official language to another without changing the language in Zoom. When speaking, ensure that your video is turned on, and please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. And pursuant to the motion adopted on March 9, 2021, I informed the committee that Mark Podlasly and Stephen Buffalo had not completed technical pre-tests. With us today by video conference are Mark Podlasly, Director, Economic Policy representing the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, representing the Mining Association of Canada, Cara Flynn, Vice President, Government and Public Affairs at Syncrude, and Tara Shea, Senior Director, Regulatory and Indigenous Affairs. And as I mentioned, we'll be joined in the first hour by President Stephen Buffalo from the Indian Resource Council. Thank you all for taking the time to appear. Each organization has up to 6 minutes for their opening statement, followed by questioning. And Director Podlasly, please go ahead as our first witness.
Good morning, and thank you for this invitation. My name is Mark Podlasly, and I'm a member of the Ntlaka'pam Nation in southern British Columbia. I am speaking to you today from Coast Salish Territory in southwestern British Columbia. I am the Director of Economic Policy at the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, a national 70 Indigenous Nation collective working to ensure that First Nations receive a share of benefits from projects in our territories through the ownership of equity in proposed pipelines, electric infrastructure, transportation routes, and other revenue-producing initiatives. I'm here today to speak on behalf of our members in support of Bill C-15, an act respecting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. For our members, UNDRIP already frames how we see development and our ability to direct decisions that are supportive of our interests. The Declaration focuses Indigenous attention on how First Nation-supported development can enable self-determination as described in UNDRIP Article 3. However, it is Article 4 that, in the opinion of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, will be key to successfully implementing UNDRIP in Canada. Article 4 states that Indigenous people, in exercising their right to self-determination, have the right to autonomy or self-government in affairs relating to their internal and local affairs, as well as ways and means for financing their autonomous functions. This financing, or fiscal component, is key to ensure that First Nations have the means to pursue UNDRIP autonomy. No government, Indigenous or not, is truly self-determining if it is reliant on an external government for financial viability. It is impossible for a government to function at any level without a source of revenue to pay for its operation. This is why our members see revenues from Indigenous held equity as providing the financial means for self-determination, and for First Nations to implement this according to UNDRIP. Without it, UNDRIP implementation will be impossible. For First Nations, a multi-generational source of equity-derived revenue will allow our nations the ability to set and fund our own UNDRIP self-determination priorities. These UNDRIP priorities include culture and language, as described in Article 11, to practice and revitalize our cultural traditions and customs. Article 12, to manifest, practice, and develop and teach our spiritual and religious traditions, customs, and ceremonies. In education and media, Articles 14 and 16, to establish and control our educational systems and institutions providing education, and to establish our own media in our own languages. In economic, social, and health improvements, noted in Article 21, the improvement of our economic and social conditions. Revenue from traditional territories, Article 26, to own, use, develop, and control the lands and territories and resources that we possess by reason of traditional ownership, occupation, or use. And in development priorities, Article 32, to develop and present priorities and strategies for the development and use of our lands and other resources. And Article 34, to promote, develop, and maintain our institutional structures. The financial assistance for this is noted in Article 39, which is we are to have the access to financial and technical assistance from states, what is contained in the declaration. These UNDRIP articles are all dependent on a revenue stream to pay for their implementation. A new Indigenous controlled fiscal component offers significant benefits for First Nations and Canada, including greater investment certainty and reduced opposition to projects, self-sustaining Indigenous governments, stable own source revenue streams to fund First Nation government priorities, the ability of First Nations to access capital sources to leverage their revenue streams to further invest in the Canadian economy, a new nation-to-nation relationship with the Crown as a true UNDRIP partner, direct First Nations involvement in the wealth generation aspects of the Canadian economy, and fulfillment of UNDRIP. These benefits will only accrue if there is a way for First Nations to acquire a revenue stream to support self-determination. At present, it is very difficult to nearly impossible for First Nations to raise or access substantive capital to invest in major projects. The advice that I wish to provide to the committee today is that the key to making UNDRIP work in Canada is to start with Article 4, which is about the ways and means for financing Indigenous autonomous functions. How this is implemented will determine if the promise of Bill C-15 and UNDRIP will be fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you very much for our first witness, Mr. Podlasly. Next, we go to with the Mining Association of Canada, Cara Flynn and Tara Shea. 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and fellow panelists. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm participating from Ottawa, which is traditional Algonquin territory, and Cara is participating from Edmonton, which is Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis people. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here today to share our members' views on Bill C-15. MAC members have a strong record of establishing respectful and mutually beneficial relationships with Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples. Our members are among the largest industrial employers of Indigenous peoples in Canada and a major customer of Indigenous-owned businesses. Across the country, there are examples of partnerships between mining companies and communities, which are advancing reconciliation and contributing to implementation of the UN Declaration. As an association, we looked to the UN Declaration and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for guidance when we were drafting our recently updated Indigenous and Community Relationships Protocol as part of our sustainability initiative towards sustainable mining. And we established a good practice level that includes a commitment to aim to achieve free, prior, and informed consent for new projects or expansions where impacts to rights may occur. This is among many other criteria in the standard designed to facilitate strong relationships through effective engagement and decision-making processes. We are supportive of the objective of incrementally and thoughtfully implementing the UN Declaration through collaboration. And we see potential for C-15 to improve relations between the Crown and Indigenous peoples and help advance reconciliation. But this will require additional clarity on certain key issues, effective implementation, and adequate resourcing. Our understanding of C-15 is that it is enabling legislation that will require the federal government to work with Indigenous peoples to co-develop an action plan to ensure that progress made to date continues. It acknowledges that the declaration is already used as an interpretive tool, but that it is not meant to give the declaration direct legal effect in Canada. We raise our interpretation of the bill today because we recognize that there are differing views as to the purpose of this bill. And this growing spectrum of interpretations is creating confusion about what the bill means and what it is intended to do. We are concerned that in the absence of a common understanding of the intent of the legislation, there will be unintended consequences, including unmet expectations, legal challenges, and increased uncertainty, all of which impact the viability of natural resource projects and their associated benefits to Indigenous individuals, communities, and businesses. To help avoid expectations diverging further, the federal government must be transparent with how it interprets the declaration and what obligations it sees arising from Bill C-15. And so this includes enhancing communications on the bill's intent in Parliament with Indigenous peoples, provincial governments, other Canadians, and the investment community. Clarity on the federal government's approach to free, prior, and informed consent and its relationship to existing duty to consult obligations is particularly important. There have been recent statements from the Minister of Justice and others explaining what FPIC means in principle, and notably that FPIC does not grant a veto over government decision-making. We believe there's an urgent need for further clarity on process beyond whether FPIC equates to a veto. In particular, the circumstances that give rise to the obligation to consult, and in some cases to seek consent, and the specific processes for each. The government's approach when efforts to obtain consent have been unsuccessful, or when consent is provided by some affected Indigenous communities, but not all. And whether existing Indigenous engagement processes may change, and the specific changes being contemplated. While we recognize that to some extent, government decisions will be made on a case-by-case basis by considering issues such as strength of claim, impacts on rights, and overall project benefits, the current lack of clarity does create uncertainty for investment, and these issues need to be clarified before the legislation is passed. In our submission, we recommended that guidance, policies, and training be enhanced to ensure that federal officials are able to effectively engage in relationship building and consultation with Indigenous communities. The current Aboriginal consultation and accommodation guidelines for federal officials to fulfill the duty to consult are extremely outdated. In addition to updating these guidelines, there are other practical steps that can be taken now to help ensure there's consistency across the federal government, including issuing a directive to federal officials informing them of the government's interpretation of FPIC and the intent of C-15. And this should be done now to ensure that there is no confusion at the working level about what C-15 means. Incorporating the government's interpretation of FPIC and the bill into guidance, training, and policies, implementing oversight mechanisms to ensure that guidance and policies are consistently followed, and committing resources for ongoing training initiatives to respond to high turnover in key federal roles. This cannot be deferred any further. This guidance is needed now. And looking ahead to the action plan, it will be critical that the process to develop this action plan be transparent and well-defined, given this wide spectrum of expectations with respect to this bill and the range of outcomes that are possible. And this includes establishing a meaningful consultation plan, determining how actions will be identified and prioritized, and ensuring the required resources are in place. We respect and support the intent for the action plan to be co-developed with Indigenous peoples, and we have asked to be engaged on the development and implementation of the action plan on any elements that may impact our sector. With that, Mr. Chair, thank you again for the invitation to present today. We look forward to the committee's questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shea. And our third presenter in this segment is the President of the Indian Resource Council, Mr. Stephen Buffalo. Please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and committee members, for the opportunity of speaking today. I am in the Treaty 7 territory. My name is Stephen Buffalo. I'm the President and CEO of the Indian Resource Council of Canada. Our organization represents over 130 First Nations across Canada who produce or have a direct interest in oil and gas industry. Our mandate is to advocate for federal policies that will improve and increase economic development opportunities for our First Nations. Few will be more impacted in the short term than the 130 members of the Indian Resource Council if the proposed UNDRIP legislation is not clearly drafted. Otherwise, this will compromise our ability of our members to engage in resource development. The members of the Indian Resource Council, like all First Nations, obviously find a lot to like in the UNDRIP, which we support without question. I'm personally from the same nation as Dr. Willie Littlechild, one of the architects of the declarations, and I've spoken to him at length about and understand the spirit and the intent behind it. But I'm very concerned about the unintended consequences of this legislation. I think in practice, it will slow down or even reverse economic development that we've achieved in our nations. Within our communities, majority of our members support involvement in the oil and gas industry. Not all, but most. That's because the royalties and profits we generate from this sector have been essential to the well-being of our people. They pay for things like elder services, housing, cultural programs, bereavement costs, recreation centers, and other programs and services that are chronically underfunded by the federal government or not funded at all. They provide us some autonomy in spending that we do not have with federal funding. They allow us to exercise our self-determination. In my own community of Musquechees, we've created a trust company, Peaceless Trust, a scholarship fund to encourage our youth to pursue post-secondary. And, the energy sector has brought many benefits to us. And we don't need any additional barriers that will impact or eliminate these benefits. Creating a competitive and stable investment environment in Canada would help bring new development projects in our territories. Having sufficient pipeline capacity, for example, would allow our members to earn full value of their products instead of having to accept a discount due to transportation and market constraints, as we see now in today's day. We've already seen countless jobs, procurement opportunities, and equity stakes lost from the cancellation of tens of billions of dollars from energy projects across Western Canada as a result of legislation such as Bill C-48 and Bill C-69. We have a lot to lose if this legislation in its current form further impacts our ability to attract investment. Let me share with you the biggest concern about Bill C-15. The legislation says that Indigenous people need to provide consent for a project to go forward, but it doesn't say who can provide or deny consent and how it's to be demonstrated. If you're saying consent is provided by chief and councils through a band council resolution or referendum, then that's one thing. But if you're saying that a small group of Indigenous activists who declare that their consent is required and that they have the right to blockade any project they do not like, or just to get it standing in court to contest it, then that's a recipe for disaster. It'd be much better if this committee can define free, prior, informed consent in legislation and determine who can represent and make decisions on behalf of the Indigenous peoples for the purpose of a project approvals. Better yet, this committee can engage Indigenous people across Canada to come to a consensus on what consent means before passing this legislation. Because you know as well as I do that some people think it's a veto. And if the committee doesn't think it's a veto, then they should make that clear. Putting the declaration verbatim into federal legislation without these definitions is going to allow special interest groups to weaponize the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People as a tool to stop any extractive project they do not like. This isn't me being paranoid. This is in our communities and on our projects all the time. I've heard it. I even heard it from some MPs using UNDRIP as a reason to cancel TMX, for example. Even as many of our members are actually involved to negotiate and purchase it. Whether or not you support the oil and gas industry, it's to the right of the 130 First Nations in our organization to develop their resources as they see fit. At the end of the day, if the bill remains vague, such as it is in its current form, I believe some judge down the line is going to decide what FPIC means in the context of resource development. But no one is going to want to invest any major projects in this country until that day comes. IRC members want better protection for Indigenous rights, and there's obviously a lot of good that can come from the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People as a shield and framework for reconciliation. But investment requires certainty. And if we're going to be self-determining and reduce our dependency on government and move beyond meager royalties, we're going to need to attract investment of our own. Thank you for the time, and I'm happy to take questions later.
President Buffalo, thank you very much. And to our witnesses now, we'll go to a 6-minute round of questioning. And I have on the first panel Mr. Melillo, Mr. Van Koeverden, Ms. Normandin, and Ms. Gazan. Eric, you're up first, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I do thank all of our witnesses for joining us today, and have already given us a lot to think about. So I'm looking forward to the questions and hearing more about what you have to say. I'd like to direct my questions to the Mining Association, whoever it is that wants to answer. Feel free to jump in. So I represent the riding of Kenora in northwestern Ontario. So there's lots of mining developments, Red Lake, Musselwhite, and many others fall into my riding. And it's obviously a major economic driver for our region, and it's a major employer of First Nations as well. So I'm wondering, maybe just to start off, if you can touch on some of the mechanisms, some of the processes that mining companies have in place currently to work in partnership with Indigenous communities and ensure that that any development projects are working to the benefit of these communities. Whoever wants to take that.
Yeah, I can take that. Maybe I'll use this opportunity to speak about relationship agreements between mining companies and communities. There are currently, we're getting close to 500 active agreements between companies and communities in Canada right now. NRCan does track this on their website. And relationship agreements, impact benefit agreements, collaboration agreements, whatever you want to call them, they really set out the terms for the relationship between a company and a community. And, they'll address the unique circumstances of the mining activity, the impacts on rights, and the relationship. So they include provisions addressing education, training, environmental stewardship, reclamation, employment, business development, and community investments. And they outline the responsibilities for both parties. Early agreements were really transactional in nature. And what we're seeing today is a move beyond financial payments to compensate for potential adverse impacts to a means to facilitate Indigenous participation in our sector. And you know what, we're actually seeing some really great results. So formal agreements have increased Indigenous participation in our sector. We're the largest employer of Indigenous peoples on a proportional basis, also a major customer of Indigenous-owned businesses, with many companies spending millions annually on contracts with Indigenous service providers. And there are other examples of company-community partnerships on things like environmental monitoring, reclamation activity, and that really makes sure that Indigenous knowledge is incorporated into the way we do business.
Perhaps, Mr. Melillo, I could just expand on Ms. Shea's comments. Mining companies and all natural resource companies really do look to our relationships, not just in the front end of a regulatory process, but through the full life cycle of the exploration, development, operation, and remediation and reclamation of our facilities. And so as Tara spoke, that involves business contracts, it involves employment, it involves capacity building in community, but it also has started to evolve into equity investment and initiatives that truly lead to great partnerships between a resource company and a community or several, depending on the facility. So it is about the project specifically, but it is also about being good partners as we work together in development.
Thank you very much. I appreciate both those comments, and maybe if I could just ask, I'll ask simply. I know it's not going to be a simple answer, but with all the work that has been ongoing already, and some of the uncertainties that you alluded to in your opening remarks around UNDRIP and around C15, do you feel that the adoption of C15 could potentially put some of these processes and agreements in jeopardy?
Could I step in here? Excuse me, Tara, I'll let you go first.
Oh, no, go ahead, Mark.
I'm speaking on behalf of the members of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition, and we're speaking about major projects. In our opinion, and this is 70 First Nations, UNDRIP actually increases certainty for development of projects in the country. We take the position that the clarity that UNDRIP provides of First Nations knowing that they will be active participants in whatever development provides investors and proponents certainty about their investments going forward. Our members are not against development, we're pro-smart development, and UNDRIP in its clauses will provide that assurance.
Thank you. If I could go back to Ms. Shea with the question, just want to get your comments on that, then I think I might have to yield the floor.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, in our submission, we pointed out that we do see some potential with, additional clarity, good implementation, and the right resourcing. But I'll just add that if we have to wait 3 years for key issues to be clarified, there's going to be this period of uncertainty. And so that's why we're focusing on some things that we can do now to reduce that uncertainty, clarify these key issues, specifically around the federal process for FPIC. And so practical guidance, training, and policies can help avoid that confusion at the working level. And we fear that in the absence of adequate guidance for federal officials, the federal approach to identifying Indigenous groups that need to be consulted, the degree of consultation required, when and what accommodation may be required, it'll continue to be inconsistent. So in a way, we're using this as an opportunity to ask for something that's already needed in terms of consistency across federal departments.
Mr. Chair, I see you're talking, but you're muted. How am I for time?
We're done. Sorry about that. My little mute button didn't work. And now unmuted, Mr. Van Koeverden, please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank the witnesses for all of the insight today. These are important subjects, and your insights and perspectives are really important. And while I'm joining you today from the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabeg, the Attawandaron, and the more recently the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, my question is for Mark Podlasly, and it comes with a glimmer of envy as you're joining us from the Coast Salish territory, which is one of the most beautiful places in Canada. And I hope that there aren't too many people from Milton listening as I express envy for how beautiful you're. I'm a water person myself, so I love your territory, and that part of the country is beautiful. I took note of your reference to Article 4 repeatedly throughout your testimony today. So I looked it up, and I wanted to read it out for my benefit and for the benefit of anybody else who's interested in listening. And it goes like this. Indigenous peoples, in exercising their right to self-determination, have the right to autonomy or self-government in matters relating to their internal and local affairs, as well as ways and means for financing their autonomous functions. I don't know whose quote it's attributable to, but I have heard that more human rights are never a bad thing. And I do know that it was Martin Luther King's quote that said, "A right delayed is a right denied." I am a strong believer that these rights have been delayed a tremendously long time, and this bill, in swift form, will take action on that and give people and persons the rights they so deserve. We have spent a lot of time discussing the nuances and differences between a veto and free, prior, and informed consent. And we also recently heard from former MP Romeo Saganash on his definition or distinction between the two. And I'll just read those. And then following that, Mr. Podlasly, I'd ask for your reflections on this subject. Veto and FPIC are two different legal concepts. One is absolute, and that is a veto, whereas the other is relative. Like all human rights, the right to free, prior, and informed consent is relative. And we need to take into consideration a lot of factors and facts and the law and the circumstances of a given situation. So, Mr. Podlasly, I just ask for your reflections on this, and thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you. The question of means and ways to finance our own autonomy, as you mentioned in Article 4, is the key to any other clauses within UNDRIP. Anything that provides for education, improvements in education, social, linguistic, all depend on some revenue stream. And First Nations need a revenue stream like any government to provide those services. And so that's why at the First Nations Major Project Coalition, we see that as key to UNDRIP. And the implementation of UNDRIP and all its promises will not be possible without that financing. The question you raised around whether a veto is in place, either practical or default. At the Coalition, we take the perspective that First Nations are included in smart development upfront as equity partners, then we essentially become co-proponents. So the question of FPIC as a veto or not is moot, because no interested party or no party that has been consulted and provides consent via an equity ownership is ever going to run into that problem. So it's why we are very keen on seeing some sort of capital access program or capital access policies that allow First Nations to make the investment in projects. So that will never be an issue.
I really appreciate that answer. And as I've been reflecting and listening, I'm albeit kind of new to this conversation as a member of this committee. I get the sense that the conversation keeps coming back to who stands to benefit from a lot of these large operations and projects. And consistently, we've talked about jobs, working jobs, like working class jobs for people who are, there. But I mean, it seems like we're talking about, in this context, a form of ownership. Like this is actually a project that would be owned in more cases by First Nations. This is not about earning a living. This would be about generating wealth and long-term viability of various communities. So I would just ask for your reflections on, again, on ownership and the ability to dictate and self-govern and decide for oneself, as the autonomy and self-government and self-determination being the underlying theme and context of this. And I just ask your reflections on that.
I just point out that impact benefit agreement, participation agreements, the ones now in effect across the country with proponents and First Nations, are not only about revenue. They are about jobs. They're about environmental protection. They are around contracting opportunities. There's many economic engines that come into that. There's also in those, and it was pointed out by Ms. Shea, is that they include provisions for input on mine closure, on reclamation of sites. They're very comprehensive, so it's not just about revenue, to make that clear. However, First Nations moving into an UNDRIP situation where self-determination as part of UNDRIP is in the equation will require some sort of funding. I should point out as well that all the promises of UNDRIP will not be possible under the payment of one government. The federal government will not have the ability to fund everything in UNDRIP. There has to be a partnership in there some ways, because we as First Nations want to provide many of these services, language retention, things that are important to our communities, like every other community in this country.
And which other levels of government or various stakeholders would you see as good or viable partners in that implementation?
The Crown, but there are two crowns in this country. It's the provinces and the feds. So depending on the arrangement and how the implementation goes for UNDRIP across the country, those two players will have to be part of the discussion. I am from British Columbia. British Columbia has already implemented an UNDRIP type legislation and is moving towards that. But the Crown in BC, or at least in my province, will also require input from the Crown federally. And that comes back to your committee.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Mr. Van Koeverden, we're past time now, and time to go to Madame Normandin. 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Ms. Normandin, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses today. It's been very enlightening. My first question is for Mr. Podlasty, and I'd just like to give you a little bit of a preamble. As a member for the Bloc Québécois, I'm particularly interested in the issue of self-determination of peoples. And in our case, we've seen in the past where there has been an attempt after the fact to define self-determination. For example, the Clarity Act. And I'm wondering if this might be an issue of concern to you. If it isn't well established in the criteria within C-15, what is free prior consent? Perhaps after the fact, that may be somewhat diluted, and it may make some points in C-15 less meaningful. You've spoken about access to funding. Well, perhaps there could be some kind of obstacle or barrier in the future which would render parts of C-15 meaningless if it were simply defined after the fact.
Thank you for your question. Just a point of clarification. Access to capital is not the same as funding. We would provide that capital into our own services and the self-determination priorities of our nation. So that is separate. And I hope I have not given that impression. The second part of I think this is your question, do we need to define what consent means now so it does not become an issue later? That would be helpful. However, that has to be done in concert with the First Nations. To have the federal government simply define this is what consent means will cause problems. UNDRIP by its nature is supposed to be a collaborative agreement to allow Indigenous people and their host states to build a better future together. The question of consent will take time, and it will have to be worked out between the parties. I should point out as well that disagreement is a very Canadian concept. When we at the Coalition are approached and asked, well, why can't you Aboriginal people or Indigenous people have some sort of unified approach? Our response is, oh, just like Canada and all the provinces are all unified in their approaches. We are building a better society and it will take time. First Nations are not in a vacuum. We understand that the consent question is important. We at the Coalition, though, are focused on the economic aspects and do believe that that question, for many situations, will not become a key issue if it's around an equity ownership and direct participation in the projects in question.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais peut-être...
Thank you very much. So perhaps I could be a little more specific in my questioning. You said that defining consent may take time and that will have to be done in collaboration. However, if it is not done before C-15 is adopted, could it eventually be somewhat diluted as a concept? And perhaps could it even end up jeopardizing the objectives? So, or do you feel that C-15 can stand without necessarily defining exactly what free, prior, and informed consent is?
Thank you. I think that the concept of consent will be worked out in time. I do not think it has to be worked out at this point. I would like to point out as well that UNDRIP itself is an international document. So the concept of consent will be evolving in many jurisdictions at the same time. So if there is something that comes out that would be, as you put it, watered down, would that stand the test of the spirit of UNDRIP, which is about building better societies together? If it is something that is not, let's say, compatible with the concepts on both sides, federal government and Indigenous people, it will be refined over time. And the precedent of international agreements is that everyone's watching, other Indigenous people worldwide. One other point I'd like to raise is that at the Major Projects Coalition, we recently put on a conference on ESG standards, environmental, social, and governance, investment standards. Capital will flow to those jurisdictions that provide certainty around questions like that. Canada will also have to follow that.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. My next question, I think I'll address to Mr. Buffalo. Now, you expressed some reservations regarding this veto concept. Given what Mr. Podlasly has just said, and knowing that the definition of consent may define over time and may actually end up being somewhat closer to a veto, would you say that your support for C-15 would stand, or would that be questioned somewhat? Would you question your support for it?
Thank you for the question. The way we look at it is, obviously, we want to see the United Nations Declaration move ahead. You know, from a human rights standpoint, you see in this country that the Indigenous people have confronted, you know, the rights to certain issues, and you know, and 9 times out of 10, it hasn't fallen in our favor. But when it comes down to defining the consent, you know, it definitely is going to take some time. And I think, you know what, a lot of the members are prepared to work with it as long as there's some certainty moving forward that the issues would be addressed. And, you know, and like my colleague Mark had mentioned, Mr. Podlasly, is, you know, it's going to take some time to make those definitions. But obviously, you know, we see the opportunities coming forward now in today's day and age. We see the ESG We see the opportunity, and I think, our organizations, as well with the First Nation Major Project Coalition, are preparing our communities to be ready for that opportunity and those investments. And we want, to ensure that there's certainty to attract the capital, to attract the investment, to find a partner. When we define consent, it's really building relationship that hasn't been there.
We're at time now, Mr. Buffalo. Thanks for your answer. Yep. Ms. Gazan, 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And my first questions are for Mr. Buffalo. Do you consider the rights enshrined in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples human rights?
Absolutely. They're definitely human rights, and that was the intent of the document from the get-go.
Do you believe that it's critical to uphold the human rights of all peoples, including Indigenous peoples, at all times without question?
Yes.
Yes. Yep. Wonderful. I ask that because according to international trade law, we know that international trade law has requirements or rules about, in quotes, risk disclosure. And this serves as some sort of, warning to potential investors. There are many areas, as you've discussed in this country, where there are fundamental Indigenous rights attached to lands and resources, and yet we often negotiate trade agreements without informing our counterparts of those same lands and resources that are still in dispute. And I'm sure we can, cite many examples right now in British Columbia. With that in mind, aren't we then negotiating these trade agreements on a lie?
Yes, and then you could take this as far back as to our treaty. When we look at our treaty and how we define the land, when we signed Treaty 6, we were told this much land, right? And then 1932, I think it was, came the Natural Resource Transfer Act. And then hence we lost our position in not knowing. And then now we're in the system. We're in the system that has been developed as Canada that does not work. We're stuck in the system of the Indian Act. And to have a voice and consent, this declaration helps us have that voice and consent and moving.
I ask that because, as I indicated, international trade law has requirements, and that includes disclosure, and that would include indicating to any investor in places that there's potential risk as a result of a land dispute that hasn't been resolved. Many examples in BC. I'd like to actually ask Mr. Podolsky or Podolsky. Can you Wow, I'm so sorry. Can I ask you the same question? Sorry.
I'm good. That's fine.
Can you first help me with your name?
Claude Lastly. That's okay.
Claude Lastly. Sorry.
Lastly. That's fine. I'm used to it with this name. I didn't have a choice in this name. I don't understand the question. You're saying that because the way it sounds now is that, yes, Canada should be disclosing to international treaty participants that there is a question about the land issue in British Columbia. Or in Canada. In British Columbia, we are primarily unceded territories. Is that your question? You're asking me if Canada is negotiating on the basis of a lie?
Yeah, because part of the international trade law requires full disclosure of risks, and I would argue that having development occur on lands that are still in dispute would be considered a risk. And we often see many of these developments end up in court as a result. The failure to fully acknowledge the impact of land disputes in negotiation, is that not negotiating trade agreements on a lie? This
is a complicated question. In British Columbia, much of the territory is unceded. And that means it has not been signed into a treaty, there has not been an agreement fulfilling the Royal Proclamation of 1763. So the question then is, yes, it is a risk. The title to the land is in question. First Nations are aware of that and are trying to pursue that, at least in British Columbia, about having benefit agreements that reflect that reality. For investment communities, they are starting to become aware of this. The ESG standards, environmental, social, and governance investment standards, do try to take that into account. Institutional investors are taking that into account. From a First Nations perspective, we would wholeheartedly agree that Canada and the Crowns, also British Columbia, need to acknowledge that fact. If they do not acknowledge it up front in trade agreements, the courts, as you pointed out, will come along and do that eventually. Court rulings repeatedly over the past 10 years in this country have sided with Indigenous rights on the question of land.
So would you say, moving forward, that a better way forward, I know that you indicated your support for Bill C-15,
yes,
would to ensure that any agreements adhere to, at the very least, the minimum standards articulated in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, as a way to support development that is rooted and framed within human rights?
We're down to 20 seconds, sorry.
Yes, yes, and I would emphasize that that has to be done, those agreements still, between Canada and First Nations directly.
Thank you very much to both of you.
Thanks, Ms. Guzan. Members of the committee, we're running close to time, so I'm going to take each of the parties in the 5-minute and 2.5-minute round once. That'll be Mr. McLean, Mr. Pawlowski, Ms. Normandan, and Ms. Guzan. Once again, 5 minutes for Mr. McLean. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm joining you today from downtown Calgary, which, of course, is the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai Nations, Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley Nations, and the Tsuut'ina Nations, as well as home to the Southern Alberta Métis Nation as well, Region 3. My first question is going to be to Stephen Buffalo. Mr. Buffalo, can you please talk to us more about the differential? And I have to be quick here, Mr. Buffalo, but the differential we receive on our resources that are on your land and the effect that has as far as the economics that you receive from the resources.
Yeah, traditionally, when we produce oil and gas, it's controlled by the federal government. And right now, it seems that we have one customer, and that's the United States. So, the pipeline capacity that we see that was supposed to go to foreign markets is not there, with the legislation that's been put forward, Bill C-48, and now, the challenging to build further infrastructure with Bill C-69. So, with the oil and gas prices where they're at today, it's been increasingly difficult. And in the past, the ripple effect is that the federal government looked at some of the producing nations as rich, which isn't true. Obviously we have a lot of needs. Our populations are growing, our demographics are growing, and a lot of the social issues that come along with that's plaguing a lot of our communities is rampant, and we need to kind of deal with that. So the price of our resource is very important, but right now it's an all-time not getting to where it used to be.
So, Mr. Professor, sorry to interrupt, but would you say, could you put a quantification about how much your nation, your organizations have lost because of the differential we receive artificially because of our constraint on infrastructure?
Well, we work with a special operating agency called Indian Oil and Gas Canada, and they collect the resources. And up to 4 years ago, they were collecting over $500 million in royalties. And this is past last quarter, they've collected only 35 million out of all of the producing nations in Canada.
Thank you very much. Is it safe to say that with the Impact Assessment Act, that the likelihood of breaking the backlog and getting those resources to market more efficiently is constrained for the near future?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's definitely making it more difficult for sure.
Okay, thank you. I'll move to Mr. Podlosky now. And Mr. Podlosky, thank you very much. I mean, I think the issue around economic sovereignty is fundamental to what we're talking about here in the UNDRIP legislation, because you're right, without the ability to finance your developments, you really don't have autonomy. But you did speak about the issues on how the world is watching this. You talked about capital will flow to certainty in the ESG world. Aaron Corey last week came out, and he's the appointee that heads up the Canada Infrastructure Bank, and he talked about risk and uncertainty holding back projects in Canada. Do you not foresee that potentially this unlevel ground created by a determination of UNDRIP that will evolve over time, as you say, won't create risk and uncertainty?
Thank you for the question. This is where I want to point this out. On terms of ESG standards, environmental, social, and governance, investment standards, that is, capital markets are looking for certainty. They're looking for returns and knowing that they will get their returns back. And right now, the uncertainty of the land question in Canada causes trouble to those investors. At the coalition, we had a conference just a week ago on this question, and we spoke to all the major investment houses in Canada, the investment pension funds, and they are of the opinion that if there is Indigenous involvement clear in these projects, like it through equity holdings, equity investments, it sends a signal to the market that this is a safe investment. It will not be disrupted by protests or issues that are happening now. So it will provide greater certainty for not just Indigenous people, but for investors and the Canadian economy.
And agreed. The question is how do you move these levers without affecting a different lever? And you've talked about that getting certainty, and at the same time, you've got an evolving definition of what that actual legal framework looks like at the end of the day. So I'm concerned about what you see as certainty, other people see as great uncertainty going forward as we evolve these definitions. The problem that we're going to have here is, I mean, we talk about the Impact Assessment Act and no real development going forward, but you take a look at how much has been foregone by First Nations as a result of developments that happen over the last 10 years because of the uncertainty in the Canadian outlook here. Getting to that point of certainty is going to be essential here for the economic benefit of all parties in Canada, particularly First Nations. So how do you arrive at a base level that actually provides that certainty? Because right now I'm hearing two different equations on that.
Mr. Podlasly will have to submit that answer unless it comes up in the next question. We're well over time, rushing along to our committee day. Mr. Pawlowski, 5 minutes.
Thank you. I am very encouraged by this entire conversation. This is what it means to implement.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pawlowski.
Did you ask me a question?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were referring to me a question.
No, we're out of time, and on that one, Mr. Pawlowski, you're up.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's two of us with very similar names.
I think the computer's booting me off. It decided to reboot. You got a great name, actually.
Thank you. I like your name too. We should. One day we'll have a coffee.
Yeah. Let me start my question, but I'm not sure if it's going to reboot before I get there. My question kind of is a follow-up of the previous question in that, is this increasing or decreasing uncertainty? And in all about Aboriginal title, I guess. I'm not sure how much C-15 really changes the present legal definition of Aboriginal title as established by the courts from Sparrow to Tsukateen. Those decisions and Tsukateen established it was sui generis. There was a beneficial interest in the land. The province has a right to regulate land use in the public interest. Now, I don't know all the fineries of Aboriginal land law, and I know that was a case in BC where there was no previous treaty, but I don't really see UNDRIP as really changing too much what has already been legally established as to what is Aboriginal title. Furthermore, I know that the courts in informing their decisions on legislation look to international legal instruments like UNDRIP. So maybe I can first direct my question to Mr. Podlasly. How much is this really changing things? We certainly hear the allegations that this is creating uncertainty, but it seems to me a little hard to buy into.
Thank you. I see that we even have the same initials, close to names. I agree with you. What's being proposed right now in UNDRIP is in some ways catching up to what industry is already doing with First Nations in many places across this country. There are impact benefits agreements in place on electrical infrastructure, electrical generation, mining projects that already incorporate a lot of the elements that you find in UNDRIP, because companies have realized that it provides them the certainty that they're looking for to not only continue those operations or start them, but to attract capital, which they need to do. They then flag those through their environmental social governance standards, which the investment community recognizes, and all the parties benefit. The Major Projects Coalition has put out reports on examples of these agreements in Canada and worldwide in many sectors. So you are right, UNDRIP itself is catching up to what the many companies and First Nations are already doing in this country. What it does is solidifies it into Canadian law, and the approaches then will be benefits and approaches will be spread to other nations and other communities and sets a standard. But you are right, Canadians are already doing the clauses of UNDRIP.
Maybe I can ask the same question to Mr. Buffalo and Ms. Shea.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I agree with Mark, things are slowly moving to that. And you know what, the industry that we're finding in the oil and gas sector is definitely has the door wide open into that relationship building. We formalize it when we call it consent, but ultimately it's something that needs to have been practiced years ago. And I think, when we see the fall of our oil prices in the world markets, the industry hit the ground just as hard, and they realize, hey, there's a partner down here, and that if we work together, that things will get better. And from the perspective of certainty, I think we're moving towards that, and finding, but ultimately, we just can't have uncertainty where again, a small group can blockade a national infrastructure project. And when democratically and elected leadership had 10 of them had made a decision to move forward in investment ownership and equity and jobs at stake and stuff like that, we just have to continue to build a relationship to understand all of the issues at hand. Thank you.
45 seconds, Mark.
Well, okay. Let me ask Mark Podlasly. UNDRIP has already been implemented in British Columbia. Have you found that it's increased uncertainty in development in British Columbia?
In half a minute.
The UNDRIP is new in British Columbia, and the discussions are still going on. But what's happened is industry has come to the table and has started to have those discussions in roundtables with First Nations and government. So it takes time, but it's well underway.
And thank you very much. And moving on, Madame Normandin, 2 minutes et demi.
Ms. Normandin, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My question is for Ms. Shea and Ms. Flynn on the uncertainty that Mr. Podlasly answered. He was saying that, in fact, uncertainty will decrease when there's buy-in on the part of Indigenous groups. So the uncertainty perhaps comes more from, say, the mining or the oil and gas industry, where points might be challenged, for example, before the courts regarding consent.
Thank you for the question. Perhaps I could start. I believe Mr. Podlasly was speaking specifically to land issues, and I'll respond in a broader context of risk. Investment is it's very much alive to risk and all of the different factors around risk. And the higher level of risk there is, the higher level of return an investor will seek to attain. And so how we see this legislation is within that lens of we need the clarity around both the fact that it is enabling legislation that does not have direct effect in law, and that it is well implemented by public officials who are trained and have the resources to do this, and the clarity around working together to achieve an outcome, as opposed to FPIC, for example, being a veto. And those are also risks that are alive in this conversation, as much as Mr. Podlasly is correct on the land aspects, for sure.
Monsieur le Président, je pense qu'avec le temps...
Mr. Chairman, I think given how much time I've left, I won't have time to ask another question and get the answer, will I?
No. Thank you, though. Sorry about that. Ms. Gazan, you have the same time, 2.5.
Thank you so much, Chair. My last question is for Madame Shea or Madame Flynn. So according to the UN Expert Mechanism on the Rights of Indigenous People study, paragraph 49 states that, in quotes, in the private sector, free, prior, and informed consent is developing into international standard for companies operating on Indigenous lands. In November 2014, First Peoples Worldwide published the Indigenous Risk Report, finding that 89% of projects assessed had high or medium risk exposure, and in quotes again, to Indigenous community opposition or violations of Indigenous peoples' rights, closed quotes. What does your organization currently do to mitigate this risk?
Maybe I'll start, and Kara, you can jump in. I'll use this opportunity to talk about Towards Sustainable Mining. For anyone who's not familiar with it, it's our sustainability initiative. It's a mandatory program for our members. It involves annual public reporting and third-party external verification, and we have an Indigenous engagement component built into the program. Since 2004, our members have been reporting on their engagement systems, and in 2019, we updated this component of TSM. And we look to the UN Declaration and the TRC for guidance. And what you'll find at what we consider a good practice level is that you would commit to striving to achieve FPIC for new projects or expansions where impacts to rights occur. But nowhere in the protocol does it say the facility has achieved FPIC, because we really see that as an ongoing process. Instead, what we have in there is, a level A good practice. It requires senior management commitments to work with Indigenous communities. Facilities would demonstrate that their engagement systems reflect the local context and are developed through engagement with affected communities. And then at the higher levels in TSM, what we consider excellence in leadership, that's where the criteria shift to companies and communities working together to co-develop engagement processes, establish the terms of the relationship. And so
just because I have limits of time, you said that, just wanted to follow up that in projects, you've had difficulty getting FPIC, you haven't achieved FPIC. When you haven't achieved complete free, prior, and informed consent of people you're partnering or nations you're partnering with, do you then proceed with projects without the free, prior, and informed consent? I want to understand this.
Very briefly, please.
I think you misunderstood. No, it's a management system standard where we don't give a verified rating that a company has achieved FPIC. It's more of a process of ongoing engagement in TSM.
Thank you for that. And I'm really sorry about the time issues, but that's the rules that we live with. So thank you to the panelists. Very wonderful presentations from everyone, very helpful to our committee. We're going to suspend and set up our next panel. So this meeting now is briefly suspended. Apologies to everyone for the very late start. We have time constraints in our committee meetings, and so we'll have to move along quickly. Each of the witnesses will have 6 minutes, and I'll be kind of a tyrant on the timing of this so that we can at least get one round of questioning in from our committee. Mr. Joffe, would you please start for 6 minutes? Mr. Joffe, you're on mute.
Okay, good afternoon, honorable committee members. I already mentioned where I'm speaking from in St. Lambert, Quebec, which is on the traditional territory of the Mohawk people. I wish to acknowledge the crucial work of former MP Romeo Saganash. As confirmed by the federal government, Romeo's Private Members Bill C-262 serves as the floor but not the ceiling in moving forward with Bill C-15. We must now build upon the standards in C-262. Indigenous peoples in Canada continue to face human rights violations. These include, inter alia, racism and other forms of discrimination, dispossession of lands, territories, and resources, impoverishment, lack of essential services, food insecurity, missing and murdered women and girls, and forced assimilation and destruction of cultures and languages. In too many instances, intergenerational trauma from residential schools continues to be experienced. It's time for real change. In this context, it is worth noting that to date, the UN Declaration has been reaffirmed at least 10 times by the UN General Assembly by consensus. No state in the world formally opposes this human rights instrument. This reinforces its significance and legal effect. I would like now to address the meaning of free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC, as affirmed in the UN Declaration, particularly in the context of proposed developments in Indigenous peoples' territories. In regard to FPIC, the term free means there must be no coercion or manipulation. Prior means consent must be obtained in advance of the activity being approved. And informed means information must not be withheld, misleading, or inadequate. Without these three FPIC elements, there would not be valid consent in international law or in Canadian law. Now, FPIC and other provisions in the UN Declaration are relative and not absolute. Article 46.3 of the Declaration includes one of the most comprehensive balancing provisions in any international human rights instrument, and I quote, "The provisions in this declaration shall be interpreted in accordance with the principles of justice, democracy, respect for human rights, equality, non-discrimination, good governance, and good faith," unquote. These are the same core principles as in the Canadian and international legal systems. These are also the same principles that have been denied to Indigenous peoples throughout history. FPIC is not the same as veto. The term veto is not used in the Declaration. Veto implies complete and absolute power, regardless of the facts and law in any given case. FPIC is also gaining support in the corporate sector in Canada and internationally. For example, the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business advises in its 2019 guidebook, and I'm quoting, "Commit to meaningful consultation, building respectful relationships, and obtaining the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples before proceeding with economic development projects," unquote. As well, the UN Global Compact, the world's largest corporate responsibility initiative with over 12,000 companies in over 160 countries, has expressed strong support for Indigenous peoples in its comprehensive business reference guide on the UN Declaration, and I quote, FPIC should be obtained whenever there's an impact on Indigenous peoples' substantive rights, including rights to lands, territories, and resources, and rights to cultural, economic, and political self-determination, unquote. Respecting human rights cannot reasonably be held up as an impediment to economic development. This legislation will lead to improved relationships, greater certainty, and less litigation. Currently, Canada is demonstrating global leadership by implementing a federal bill on the UN Declaration. However, some key revisions to Bill C-15 are still required. For example, I would urge adding racism to the 8th preambular paragraph and to the action plan in section 6.2A1. Overall, Bill C-15 is a positive catalyst for cooperation, justice, healing, and mutual respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Exactly on time. Much appreciated. Madame Langlois, Lelièvre, please.
Ms. Langlois and Ms. Lelièvre, you have 6 minutes. Good afternoon. Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee, members of the Parliament of Canada, and members of the committee, I'd like to begin by recognizing that our offices are located in Indigenous territory that has been unceded. Thank you for inviting Amnesty International to participate in your hearings on Bill C-15, an act respecting the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Adopting the declaration in various jurisdictions in Canada is a priority issue for Amnesty International Francophone and for Amnesty International in Canada. We support the adoption of the declaration by the UN Assembly in 2017. And we would like that to be the case here. We have intervened at many levels in Canada, and each and every time we have repeated how important it is that this declaration be implemented in Canadian jurisdictions. Various investigations have taken place and inquiries, including the one into murdered and missing women and children, including the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and they have all recommended the implementation of this declaration. This is the #1 principle in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and it reads as follows. UNDRIP is a framework for reconciliation at all levels and in all spheres of Canadian society. We supported C-262, whose purpose was the same as C-15, and it was sponsored by the NDP member, Romeo Saganaj, at the time. Unfortunately, though, it was not adopted before the elections in 2019. We were pleased in 2019 to hear British Columbia's announcement on the adoption of the declaration within its own legislature. On March 10, there was an open letter that was signed by over 200 organizations and individuals, including a majority of Indigenous peoples, and it was endorsed by Amnesty International. It was published in Hill Times, calling on the government to adopt C-15 before the end of this Parliament. As you can see, Amnesty International supports Bill C-15. It has been very late in the coming, and Canada has to move forward with the implementation of this declaration. It's no longer time for studies and inquiries. It's now time for action. For 13 years, civil society has been working to make this declaration a reality. Indigenous peoples in Canada have been subjected to the oppression of colonization, and the Parliament of Canada has an historic opportunity to move reconciliation forward with Indigenous peoples. the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is a consensual instrument that adopts minimum standards for the survival, dignity, and well-being of Indigenous peoples. Implementing these standards is absolutely essential to improving the lives of Indigenous peoples in Canada and throughout the world, and it is integral to the respect on the part of Canada for human rights. The current bill is not a perfect one. Far from it. However, it is a very important bill, and we must not miss this opportunity to adopt a bill that is so essential. Amnesty International would have liked specific issues regarding women and children be more present in Bill C-15. Yes, the inquiry has been mentioned, but it is not enough. Children are doubly discriminated against, and women are. Women because they are Indigenous and because they are women. So it will be very important when this bill is implemented that Indigenous women be included in all stages of its implementation, and that action focus specifically on including women so that there is justice for all the discrimination and the hurt that women continue to suffer from. They also have to be stakeholders as well in a fair country for all peoples. Amnesty International would also like to see that there be consultation and collaboration with Indigenous peoples, and that be explicit in Bill C-15. There are many outstanding questions, we feel. Who will be consulted? How will they be consulted? And when will they be consulted? Amnesty International would also like to see this declaration be harmonized with all Canadian laws. The declaration has many articles dealing with Indigenous participation in decision-making, including self-determination and the right to self-government in Article 4, the right to participate in decision-making, Article 16, and Article 23, the obligation on the part of governments to obtain prior free and informed consent in Article 19, the obligation to consult Indigenous communities in Articles 32 to 38, an obligation to work with Indigenous peoples under Article 22 and 32, for example. There's also an obligation to respect the customs and traditions of Indigenous peoples in the Declaration. Despite our reservations, Amnesty International calls on members of Parliament and members of the Senate to work diligently in a nonpartisan fashion and respecting its commitment to Indigenous peoples. We call upon all members of Parliament to act according to the highest principles so that Bill C-15 will be adopted by the end of this parliamentary session. Thank you very much.
And moving now to the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers, Vice President Shannon Joseph, Government Relations and Indigenous Affairs, and Brian Schmidt, President and CEO of Tamarack Valley Energy. Ms. Joseph, are you taking the lead?
Brian will be taking the lead.
Brian, go ahead, 6 minutes. Yep.
Thank you for the Standing Committee, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from the territories, traditional territories of Treaty 7 and the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. My colleague, Ms. Shannon, is speaking from the traditional Algonquin territory. My name is Brian Schmidt, Ake Kikitstaki. I am CEO of Tamarack Valley Energy, and I'm here today on behalf of the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers in my capacity as chair of our Indigenous Affairs Policy Group. I've also been in business with the Kainai people for decades. As operator of oil and gas drilling rigs on reserve land and the Blood Tribe, I'm proud to be honored a few years ago with the title of Honorary Chief of the Kainai. CAP first publicly voiced our support for UNDRIP back in 2016. At the same time, the federal government did. We continue to support UNDRIP implementation in a manner consistent with the Canadian Constitution and law. For the people of our association, creating mutually beneficial partnerships with Indigenous people and communities, businesses and employees is central to how we operate and to our role in reconciliation. Today, the oil and gas industry produces more from Indigenous businesses, procures more from Indigenous businesses than any other industry in Canada. And if I may say so, far more than the federal government as a whole. In 2017 to 19, in aggregate spend with Indigenous communities was $5.9 billion. In 2019, Indigenous procurement was 11% of our procurement. We are also one of the largest employers of Indigenous people and Indigenous men and women, and they earn on industry the highest wages compared to any other sector in the country. These relationships and opportunities have been one of the strongest paths for building Indigenous prosperity in Canada. There are Indigenous groups that are looking to purchase the Trans Mountain Expansion Pipeline, and there are pretty much new equity deals being announced every month with Indigenous ownership in oil and gas projects. Finally, Indigenous communities across Canada earn hundreds of millions of dollars each year from royalties and other benefits through the development of resources on reserve lands. What this means concretely for my Indigenous colleagues is that resource development provides important opportunities to address poverty and advance economic self-determination, and I've seen that firsthand. We aren't here to ask you to choose between our industry's interests and Indigenous people's interests. I'm here to say firmly that I believe that there are same interests in this matter. We want Indigenous rights to be protected, and we also want to have a healthy and prosperous oil and gas resource sector so that we can all benefit from a strong Canadian economy. Bill C-15 as written will create more uncertainty for our industry and resource development as a whole in Canada. This will mean that we cannot attract investment from capital markets, that good projects, including ones supported by the majority of Indigenous communities, will not proceed. Yet this will harm the oil and gas sector, and we want to avoid that. But more importantly, it will also harm the Indigenous communities who value resource development as an important means of creating jobs and revenues. Human rights equals human economic development. Financial Post calculated in the last 5 years, we've lost $150 billion worth of energy projects in Canada, abandoned or suspended because investors would not take the risk of financing them. Just last week, we heard about Chevron pulling out of Kitimat LNG, which had a tremendous Indigenous involvement. If you do the math, 11% of Indigenous procurement on $150 billion on projects means lost income to Indigenous peoples of $16.5 billion. The lack of clarity and uncertainty has real consequences in terms of people's livelihoods and opportunities for prosperity and self-determination. What industry is asking is not to leave things undefined. Make it easier for us to do business with Indigenous communities, not harder. CAP has some specific amendments that we would help alleviate the major concerns to our industry and investors on C-15. This includes, first, clarifying that C-15 does not have an immediate application as domestic federal law, but rather establishes a process for the review of existing Canadian laws. Second, defining free, prior, and informed consent for a Canadian context. In our understanding, FPIC is a process, not an outcome, and as many, including as Minister Lametti, have said, it is not a veto. We have a suggestion definition that reflects this and is consistent with Principle 6 of the federal government's 10 principles for the implementation of UNDRIP. It is also consistent with the federal provincial governments retaining their authority to make final decisions. And finally, ensuring the action plan is the main vehicle by which to make UNDRIP practicable in Canada, co-developed with Indigenous peoples, and with the intention that stakeholders such as ourselves would be able to engage in dialogue where appropriate to our industry. The action plan process should be adequately resourced and create clear accountabilities. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Schmidt. And members of the committee, we're going to do at least the one round of 6 minutes, which will take us past the appointed hour of concluding at 1 o'clock. So is there anyone opposed to extending the meeting past 1 o'clock for a brief time so that we can get our 6 minute? No one's opposed, so I'll take that as we're in favor of carrying on, and so we'll do the 6 minute round of questions now. And first up is Mr. Vidal. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all our witnesses for joining us here today. We've received a lot of great testimony over the last few weeks on our study of Bill C-15. My first question is going to be for Mr. Schmidt or Ms. Joseph. I'll let you both have the opportunity if you want to maybe respond to this, but I read a brief that you submitted a while back, and you referred to many of the same concepts in your testimony today about the great work that people in your organization have done as far as their work with Indigenous people. And with First Nations and the relationships and whatnot that your industry has in those communities. You talk about the investment, you talk about the contributions that are made. I made a statement last week to one of our witnesses, and I said to them that those who champion poverty reduction through economic development often get labeled as lacking compassion. And I would see that as the exact opposite. And I think you might want to speak to that in the context of, the work that your member organizations do in these communities. Mr. Schmidt, even just your own relationship that you talked about specifically with your company. I'd like you to expand on that a little bit and just talk about how the work that your organizations do, the relationships you have, the incredible amount of procurement and job creation that you initiate in these communities has on the opportunity to end poverty, to create success for many First Nations and grant them the opportunity to be successful in the future and invest in things like housing and recreation and social issues that they have. In my community, in my riding, it's, we deal with a lot of suicide crisis kind of thing, and the investments that are made by industry are huge in those kinds of issues in the First Nations community. So I'd like you to speak to that. And then I would also like you to just speak to how the potential uncertainty of Bill C-15 might either contribute to or hinder that in the context of the great work you've already done.
Certainly. Certainly. So let me speak to the my personal involvement and how I see this as so important. I also sit as an advisor to the board of the Indian Resource Council of Canada. Stephen Buffalo spoke earlier, and that's his association. I've seen their revenues be destroyed, and it's really interesting because capital markets can move capital from one area jurisdiction to another. First Nations cannot move their reserve. So I see firsthand how this affects their communities. At the same time COVID was coming down, their revenue shortfalls were crashing down. And so we ended up assisting the Kainai tribe with some COVID relief. So I feel for what Stephen Buffalo and his membership have been going through. And in my particular circumstance, we help with cultural events. We do movies to connect elders with young people. A lot of the things that I've heard mentioned today, we just do hand in hand. And I think Canada really has the gold standard in terms of how we work with First Nations. Equity partnerships, we involve them in the business side. We're doing some work with the Kainai now on abandoning wells and putting people to work. So this is critical to their being. And I will tell you that their pride, they really do not want handouts. They want to drive their own economic activity, and this gives them an opportunity. With respect to the risk, MP Gazan brought up risk disclosure. That's a very important. I'm really glad you brought that up because risk disclosure has to occur on any major projects. I visit investors in New York, Houston, Europe, all over the world, and they talk about the Canadian jurisdiction as being very difficult to invest in. Financial Post, as I mentioned, 150 billion canceled projects because the investors wouldn't take the risk. I've seen investors choose Siberia over British Columbia because LNG development they thought was too difficult. And we've seen Warren Buffett pull $9 billion out of Saguenay, Quebec. And so it's interesting to me, a number of speakers talk about the investment community as if they are part of it. I will tell you that the investment community, you just need to look at the register, the number of canceled projects and the number of new ones introduced to know that Canada is a very risky jurisdiction. The 20 billion Frontier Oil Sands project canceled, and that's one that had one of the most stringent environmental, social, and governance to date, and it was canceled. We've seen pipelines, even with equity ownership by Indigenous peoples, that is not a safety valve for getting projects through. The only projects, main linear projects that we see going through are ones that are financed by the federal government or one that are financed by Indigenous people themselves, not so much the private industry. And so Gateway was about 20-30% owned by First Nations, and that was canceled. Keystone XL was just canceled with Indigenous ownership. So that is no guarantee for that. So I think the jurisdiction is has just become, this is just another element. With the clarity that we're seeking, we think we can change this, and we're willing to work with in the Action Committee to take care of that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And that brings us to time, Gary. Thank you. Ms. Jaime Batiste. Mr. Batiste, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question is for Paul Joff. Paul, you know, you did a good presentation on why human rights were a key part of UNDRIP, and you really spoke to those core principles. But can you tell me a little bit about the background of why UNDRIP was necessary to establish those minimum human rights? Were nation states and the industries not already respecting those core human rights in the lead up to UNDRIP?
Well, thank you for your question. I've worked on human rights for Indigenous people since 1974. I've been involved in the international processes, both at the UN and also at the Organization of American States in Washington. And I can tell you that in both forums, the UN included Indigenous peoples from all countries in the world. And there are about 470 million Indigenous people in up to 90 countries. What we heard is, for example, the duty to consult alone has not worked for Indigenous peoples in any region. They came to the UN and they came to the Organization of American States, different Indigenous peoples, sometimes it was the same, and they described all the violations, the human rights violations, the poverty because of the dispossession of lands, territories, and resources. I didn't hear many people, there are always a few, but considering the thousands that I did meet, they did not mention that they were against development. In fact, the UN Declaration in articles, well, it's in the right of self-determination, it's in the right of self-government, it's in Article 20, Article 23, and also 32.1. Indigenous peoples also have a right of development. So development was not something that people opposed. What people opposed were the tremendous abuses that led to impoverishment. And this is a human rights instrument. It's recognized as a human rights instrument by the UN and everywhere else. And it's about working together. That's why it says consultation and cooperation. That's why the DRIPA bill in BC talks about consultation and cooperation. It's not to create divisions. It's to come together in a fair way based on principles and rights that are universal. So I don't know if that helps, but that's a quick answer.
It does help. And just in the final 3 minutes, I'd like to ask, you know, as an Indigenous person, I've been kind of concerned with hearing industry and corporations come to the table that's saying, well, Indigenous people really want just to be a part of the economic development in Canada, whereas I'm listening to Indigenous youth across the Canada who are fighting systemic racism, fighting for rights, doing what they can to protect the environment in what we now know is a climate change that is real and it's a pressing concern, especially for Indigenous people. How do we balance in this country the rights that should be given to all human beings and certainty of investments from corporations for profits and further investments?
Are you asking me?
Yes, I'm asking you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's to us, it's always been about cooperation. If you work together. In order to persuade Africa, we were told we had to meet with the most hardcore countries in Africa that existed because they always take the lowest common denominator for, remaining together. And we did that. And we had a very good relationship. And mainly, it was about being genuine and talking about real issues, understanding the position of the people or positions of the people you're speaking with or countries, and then together coming to some kind of consensus. And that's what occurred over 24 years on the UN Declaration. So I think a lot of Indigenous peoples, I can't speak for them, they can each speak for themselves, but I think that they felt that there's a lot of confidence worldwide to proceed on this basis. And countries have, each year they keep reaffirming the UN Declaration. They also keep reaffirming free, prior, and informed consent. It's not seen as a veto. Yes, there are different entities that may see it as a veto. The UN does not consider it a veto. It isn't, human rights are generally not absolute, they're relative. So you have to balance automatically your human rights with other people's human rights or other rights. So there's a lot of potential for real cooperation where no one is left impoverished.
And that leaves us 10 seconds. Thanks, Jaime. Madam Gill.
Ms. Gill, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. And I'd like to thank all our witnesses today for having accepted our invitations. And my question is going to be for Ms. Langlois. Thank you so much for joining us today. And more broadly speaking, thank you for all the work that Amnesty International does. In your opening remarks, you said that you thought we have to work diligently to adopt Bill C-15. Perhaps what you're implying is that there may be problems in doing that quickly. I realize that for C-262 it wasn't adopted. We don't want the same to happen in this case. So are you saying that we should think of any difficulties that may lie ahead so that we can work hard and so that we can resolve them in order to be able to implement Bill C-15? Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Gill, for your question. I think that members of Parliament, that is, members of the House of Commons and senators, must work hard and diligently without partisanship, and they must be guided by the highest principles of human rights. I can only agree with everything that Paul Joffre just said. One shouldn't get mired in false arguments. For example, claiming that implementing this declaration would provide a veto to Indigenous peoples. That's not what the declaration says, and it's not what it intends or prescribes. This is about human rights, collaboration, and negotiation between all peoples, and to repair any injustices that have occurred and that continue to occur with respect to Indigenous peoples. We have to, together, build the future and the present. It has to be one that is better, fairer for all peoples in Canada. Thank you very much, Ms. Langlois. You actually already answered a question I was going to ask you. You spoke about the veto and you referred to free, prior, and informed consent. And so the question I wanted to ask you was this. Several witnesses have implied that economic development and C-15, adopting the declaration, are not necessarily compatible. And I'd like to know what your own vision is. No, there is no contradiction between the two. There is no contradiction between economic development and the respect for human rights. Indigenous peoples have a right to economic development. They also want to be a part of that economic development. And therefore, they obviously want to be a part of that economic development. And we therefore have to do that with Indigenous peoples when they are involved and when their lands are involved. There is no contradiction between the Declaration and respecting the human rights of Indigenous peoples. So on the contrary, then, from what I understand, tell me if I'm mistaken, this would actually be beneficial for First Nations, that is to say, to implement a bill like Bill C-15. Not only would it be beneficial for Indigenous peoples, it would also be beneficial for all of us. When economic projects are brought in with the consent of the peoples involved, then those economic projects have better outcomes, and they are developed in the interests of all involved. Thank you very much, Ms. Langlois. And I have one last question. For a few weeks now, we've been listening to witnesses. You raised a point that we haven't necessarily spoken about, and that is the issue of the rights of women and the double discrimination that Indigenous women can suffer, being women and being Indigenous. Please tell me if I'm wrong, but you were saying that when this is implemented, this is something that we have to look at. And what I was wondering was if there's something we can do before, for example, in the preamble. Is there something that we could do with this bill, any changes that we should make that would be important? Well, of course, if there can be an affirmation, for example, and if there is consent on this bill, then that is a good thing. If it can be affirmed in the bill that it is important to consult not only Indigenous peoples, but women, Indigenous women specifically, when it comes to the implementation, well, then we can only agree with something like that. Right, then perhaps one last question, a quick question. So even though many people say they support Bill C-15, sometimes what we do here is that rights are already protected by Section 35, Article 35 of the Constitution. What do you think? Do you think there's any distinction to be made between the two, between the Declaration and the Section 35? Obviously, you said everyone will benefit if we adopt C-15. Well, adopting the Declaration goes much further than Section 35. This is a political affirmation. And adopting the Declaration means adopting a societal framework, a framework that specifically recognizes the rights of Indigenous peoples and that frames how we live together and how society lives together.
I'm sorry, we'll have to stop there and go to our final questioner, which is Ms. Gazan, for 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thanks to all the panelists today. My first question is for Mr. Jaw. Since the adoption of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples at the UN General Assembly in 2007, could you share with this committee some of the important international developments relating to the declaration and how other jurisdictions, countries have approached its implementation, and perhaps how the courts here and abroad already reference the declaration in interpreting Indigenous rights?
Yes, thank you for that question. Well, one thing that's progressing, it's always actually increasing, is the number of states in Latin America that have included the UN Declaration or certain critical provisions in their legislation and often in their constitutions. So that's a huge development. Also, this is really important in places like Africa and Asia, and there are still challenges there. I'm not saying there aren't challenges, but this has been quite a big development. I'll give you an example. I went up to the representative from one of the African countries just before a vote. And I said, why are you against the UN declaration? And the person answered, well, that means the declaration forces us to make agreements with Indigenous peoples, and we never make agreements with Indigenous peoples. Now, what it showed in our ongoing discussions is that by discussing more, they were able in Africa to change their position enough to support the UN declaration. And that's a huge change for millions of Indigenous people. It's the same in Asia. I'm not saying that there aren't, very serious challenges in both those continents, as there is everywhere else. But the UN declaration is like a common language of human rights. And that's something that people can build on, because these countries have their own human rights legislation. Sometimes it's better or sometimes it's worse. But my experience has been that it's helped to rally real discussions. And the UN, for example, now has Indigenous experts on key bodies in the UN to further this jurisprudence. And countries have accepted that. So these are all very positive developments, both now and for the future.
I want to also ask, because of the confusion, the expression seems to give rise to your understanding of preambular paragraph 18 and section 4A of C15, where it is affirmed that the UNDRIP is a source of interpretation of Canadian law, and it has application in Canadian law. Can you clarify your understanding of preambular paragraph 18 and section 4A of the bill?
Oh, of the bill, sorry. Just give me a second. And what was the section of the act?
Section 4A.
4A. Yeah, 4A is critical because, well, first of all, there is a problem with 4A. It says the purpose of this act is, and it has A and B. That's not one purpose. That goes below the standard that was in C262 that Romeo Saganash had emphasized. So it should be the purposes of this act are, and then you have A and B. B leads to the action plan. A is an independent statement. It has application in Canadian law. Different courts, provincial courts and federal courts, have already applied the UN declaration without this bill. Quebec has, Ontario in a number of cases, both provincially, both in provincial courts, and then you have also federal courts. So this goes to the very essence of this bill. There is no doubt that the UN declaration has application because it does in many countries, even without a law. But some people say, well, it could lead, I heard today, to unintended consequences. Every bill can be interpreted and one can say there could be unintended consequences. But it's pretty clear in the jurisprudence how it's evolving. And it's evolving in Australia, New Zealand. There are many cases relying on the UN declaration. Indonesia even has an important case on the UN declaration. So I see that as a core provision, but the purpose should be changed to purposes are. It was never meant to be one purpose.
One final question.
Oh, we're at time, Ms. Kazan.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joff. Thank you, Chair.
And if there is anything, witnesses, that you feel has not been covered or additionally needs to enlighten our committee and our analysts, please feel free to make further written submissions, because we do want to, as much as we have some time constraints, cover as much as possible. And thank you very much for a very informative, very productive, I'm sure, committee meeting. And unfortunately, because the meeting was moved from Thursday, some of us had to juggle our schedules and to make this happen today. So we'll conclude our meeting for today. Thank you very much, everyone. This meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.